Why breaking a habit feels like danger. The ancient logic of comfort. Have you ever noticed that the exact moment you decide to change your life is the exact moment your brain decides to fight you? You set the alarm for 5 a.m., determined to build a new routine, but when it goes off, staying in bed feels like a matter of survival. You tell yourself you are going to focus and do deep work, but within 10 minutes, you feel an overwhelming, almost physical urge to check your phone. It is not just a preference for comfort. It feels like a genuine threat to step out of it. We often frame this as a lack of discipline. We tell ourselves we are lazy, that we lack willpower, or that we are simply not cut out for the success we want. But what if your failure to break bad habits has nothing to do with your willpower? What if, instead, your brain is functioning exactly as it was designed to? To understand why change is so difficult, we have to look back at the environment that shaped the human brain. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived in a world where uncertainty meant death. The ancient logic of survival was brutal and straightforward. Conserve energy, stay with the group, and avoid anything new or unfamiliar. In the ancestral environment, breaking a habit didn't just mean trying a new morning routine. It meant straying from the known path, which usually led to starvation, exposure, or becoming a predator's meal. Your brain evolved to associate familiarity with safety. The habits you have right now, no matter how destructive they might be to your long-term goals, are keeping you alive today. Therefore, your brain classifies them as successful survival strategies. When you try to break a habit, even a bad one like binge-watching television instead of working on your business, your brain perceives this deviation as a massive risk. It triggers an anxiety response, releasing stress hormones that make you feel uncomfortable, agitated, and desperate to return to the familiar baseline. Think about the sheer amount of mental resistance you face when trying to start a difficult task. I want you to pause for a second and think about a time you tried to quit a bad habit or start a difficult project. What did that internal resistance actually feel like in your body? Let me know your experience in the comments, because identifying that feeling is the first step to beating it. That resistance is your primitive brain pulling the alarm. It is screaming at you that conserving energy is safe, while spending energy on an unproven new endeavor is dangerous. This is the evolutionary trap of comfort. We are operating a 21st century life using a brain calibrated for the Pleistocene epoch. The very mechanism that kept our ancestors alive during harsh winters is the same mechanism that keeps you paralyzed on the couch today. Consider the concept of energy conservation. To an ancient hunter-gatherer, calories were scarce and hard to come by. Sitting still and doing nothing was the smartest evolutionary strategy when you were not actively hunting or foraging. Fast forward to today, where calories are abundant and cheap. Your brain still operates on the premise that you might starve next week, so it strongly prefers that you sit on the couch and scroll through social media, expending 0 calories. It rewards you with dopamine for doing nothing because, in the ancient world, resting was a highly profitable survival tactic. When you decide to go to the gym, your logical brain knows it is good for your cardiovascular health and longevity. But your primitive brain sees you voluntarily burning precious calories for no immediate reward. It doesn't understand the concept of a summer body or long-term heart health. It only understands immediate calorie expenditure versus calorie intake. So, it hits the brakes. It creates feelings of lethargy, generates a dozen perfectly rational excuses, and makes the couch feel impossibly comfortable. If you have ever felt this exact battle between your logical goals and your primitive desires, you are not alone. If this evolutionary perspective is making sense of your own struggles, hit the like button. It helps push this message to others who are beating themselves up over what is essentially ancient biology. The problem compounds when we consider the social aspect of our evolution. The ancient logic of group survival dictated that isolation was a death sentence. To survive, you had to fit in. You had to adhere to the norms of your tribe. If your tribe woke up at sunrise, you woke up at sunrise. If your tribe ate a certain way, you ate a certain way. Standing out or breaking the mold meant risking exile. And exile, in the ancient world, meant death. Today, when you decide to radically change your life, to stop drinking, to wake up at 4:30 a.m., to spend your weekends building a business instead of partying, you are essentially breaking the norms of your modern tribe. Your brain interprets this divergence from your social circle as a threat to your social standing, and by extension, a threat to your survival. The fear of missing out, the anxiety of being judged by your peers, the deep-seated worry that you are alienating your friends. These are not just modern insecurities. They are ancient survival alarms ringing in your head. Your brain would rather you be safely mediocre within the herd than successfully isolated outside of it. This is why peer pressure doesn't end in high school. The subtle pressure to conform to the average habits of those around you is rooted in a biological imperative to avoid exile. When breaking a habit feels like danger, it is often because it subconsciously feels like social suicide. So how do we override a system that has been fine-tuned over millions of years? How do we break habits when our biology is actively trying to stop us? The first step is a radical shift in perspective. You must stop viewing your laziness, procrastination, and fear as character flaws. They are not signs that you are weak. They are signs that your survival hardware is functioning perfectly. Once you realize that the anxiety of change is just ancient programming, you can stop taking it so personally. You can observe the resistance without obeying it. I want you to think about the one habit you have been trying to build but keep failing at. What is it? Drop it in the comments below. Let's see how many of us are fighting the exact same evolutionary battles. To beat the ancient brain, you have to trick it. The primitive brain hates massive, sudden changes because they represent high risk. If you try to completely overhaul your life overnight, waking up 3 hours earlier, cutting all sugar, working out every day, and meditating for an hour, your brain will interpret this as a catastrophic environmental shift. It will flood your system with cortisol and drag you back to baseline within a week. This is why New Year's resolutions almost universally fail. Instead, you must use the principle of micro-deviations. You introduce changes that are so small, your primitive brain does not register them as a threat. You don't try to wake up 3 hours earlier. You wake up 10 minutes earlier. You don't cut all junk food. You replace one snack a day. You create changes that slide under the radar of your survival alarms. Over time, these micro-deviations establish a new baseline of familiarity. Once the new habit becomes the familiar baseline, the ancient brain switches sides. It begins to defend the new habit with the same fierce energy it used to defend the old one. It starts associating the new routine with safety and survival. Furthermore, you must hack the social survival mechanism. If your brain is terrified of being exiled from your current tribe because of your new habits, the fastest way to alleviate that fear is to find a new tribe. You have to surround yourself, even if only digitally at first, with people whose normal baseline is your goal. If you want to be a highly disciplined entrepreneur, you must immerse yourself in the content, communities, and conversations of highly disciplined entrepreneurs. Your primitive brain will eventually recognize this new group as your tribe, and the instinct to conform will push you toward success instead of mediocrity. It takes immense mental fortitude to accept that your own mind is wired to keep you safe, not to make you exceptional. Greatness is inherently unsafe. It requires risk, calorie expenditure, and stepping away from the herd. If you are serious about overriding your ancient programming and building the discipline required to live an exceptional life, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We are building a community of people who refuse to let primitive instincts dictate their modern potential. The next time you feel that heavy, paralyzing resistance when you try to sit down and do the hard work, smile. Acknowledge it. Tell yourself, that is just my ancient brain trying to keep me safe. And then do the work anyway. You are no longer living in a world where unfamiliarity means death. You are living in a world where familiarity means stagnation. Your comfort zone is not a safe haven. It is an evolutionary trap. The danger is no longer out there in the unknown. The real danger is staying exactly where you are, doing exactly what you did yesterday, and letting the ancient logic of group survival slowly drain the potential out of your life. Break the habit. Endure the artificial anxiety. Step out of the cave. The modern world belongs to those who can overcome their ancient minds.